I ask the question a lot to people. It's like, okay, yep, we can set up notifications, great, but who's going to be answering that notification at 2:30 in the morning? Somebody's in your parking lot walking around. Is that person a threat? Is that person just somebody walking across your parking lot that, doesn't need to be, need to really take action on? In that case, at 2:30 in the morning, our remote guarding service is going to be able to answer that notification, be able to see it, and be able to respond to it as it needs.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us in another episode of the In the Trenches Roundtable. Thanks so much for joining us again here. We've got an awesome panel of experts to cover a really fun topic today, and we actually have a special guest. So I'll start by introducing our special guest. This is someone who could be perhaps one of your dedicated account managers, and he goes by the name Danny Mize. Danny, welcome to the In the Trenches Roundtable.
Hey everyone.
Heck yeah.
Happy
Hi,
to be
Danny.
here.
Today's topic is remote guarding. So video verification, professional video monitoring, these are terms that are floating around our industry like wildfire right now. Today, we're specifically going to be covering remote guarding. We'll dive into some of the details, we'll get granular, and we're going to break down the video in 4 main sections. So the first section we'll cover today is going to be what even is remote guarding. We're going to move into section 2, which will cover who should really be interested in this service. And the third section will then talk about remote guarding versus just general notifications. And finally, section 4, we'll wrap this thing up by getting our panel of experts' final thoughts on remote guarding. So without further ado, let's talk about what remote guarding even is. And James, I'll let you take this, but can you tell us what remote guarding really is?
Yeah, I think remote guarding, the best way of putting it, is it's a service that monitors your cameras after hours and protects against things like vandalism, theft, and if something is detected during that time, you get real human intervention. So they're going to be able to see, okay, somebody's in the parking lot right now. Is that person a threat? Is that person just somebody walking past the parking lot and nothing else needs to happen? But they're going to watch that scene and really be able to determine what the next steps are. So if they do determine that person's a threat, they're going and they're looking in cars or something like that. The reaction's customizable. We have options for, two-way audio. So that person watching the person looking inside the cars can then yell at them and be like, hey, you looking in the cars, the police are on their way, and actively try to prevent, that car from being smashed and grabbed. It can also dispatch the police. It can call you or a local guard. It's very customizable on the responses. But in general, the idea is this service is there to intervene and prevent a potential crime or vandalism or theft.
Wow, that's awesome. So you're saying that there's going to be somebody monitoring the cameras, like watching the cameras?
Yeah, so actually, and the way it works is somebody's not there in a big room that you see on TV show, like movies or whatever, where there's a million cameras up there and they're kind of like doing this number. They're getting alerted when a specific event is triggered on the camera. So like with our analytics on our cameras, which we'll cover here in a second, and they know when it's the difference between a person versus in a vehicle versus trees or anything else that we talked about in some of our motion ones. So once they get that alert, that's when they start looking at the camera and they follow that camera until they don't no longer need to look at it. And then they'll stop looking at it until the next event occurs, basically.
Wow, I've got so many follow-up questions, but the first one that comes to mind is, does that mean that someone would be watching the cameras all of the time?
Just when there's events, yeah.
Just when there's events? Gotcha. Well, then I think the next one is the elephant in the room. Who's monitoring? Who's the one watching this?
They are, or we're partnering with US-based monitoring companies to provide this service.
So they're based in the United States. Do I get to choose what cameras are being watched?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can choose just one or two if there's just, a couple of cameras that's in a point of interest that you were looking to cover for whatever reason you're having, or you can have 100. So if you're wanting an entire facility, or if you have NVRs or cameras all across the country, you can have those all reporting back based off of the triggers that they send over to the monitoring service. Now it's, yeah, it's great.
Awesome. So how does this type of service compare to something like video verification services?
A great question, and that's one of the biggest, I think, confusion things is when you talk about, remote guarding versus visual verification. So remote guarding is very good at is looking for your perimeter outside. So if somebody's in your parking lot, if you have assets outside that you need to secure, it's going to be really good at that because it's looking for the threats that can be outside. Visual verification relies on having a physical alarm system already in person. So like you can imagine if you had an alarm system on your business. One of the biggest issues is sometimes sensor-based systems will cause false alarms. And so what visual verification does is exactly what it says. It verifies like, hey, this is an actual threat. This is somebody going into our facility and not a shadow setting off a motion detector or something weird like that. And so, number one, for visual verification, you need to already have an alarm system, professionally monitored, activated, everything like that. And for the visual verification, that component is just looking at, yes, that's a threat or not. So it's there to avoid a false alarm fee from your municipality, basically. So you need to have that stuff up, whereas you don't need to have a physical alarm system. And in fact, an alarm system can't really help with a lot of the outside perimeter assets that you might have, or protecting your parking lot, or anything else that might be in there. So it's two totally different services. Video verification is usually a fee add-on to your typical alarm setup. It's not something you get on your own kind of thing. It's usually fairly cheap as well, just because they're only checking when somebody's actually intruding into the area. So very different services. Remote guarding is there to protect your facility, kind of like it's a substitute for an actual guard on location, really.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
James, what you're saying then is visual verification relies on something to already have happened, whereas remote guard can alert you or alert the monitoring company before anything happens.
Yeah, exactly. And they can actually intervene there too with that two-way audio functionality to try to scare the guy away, or whoever's trying to do anything that they don't want it to happen.
Okay, so it's preventative instead of being reactionary, like a traditional alarm and the visual verification.
Yeah. Yep. Visual verification, just there for you to avoid a fine on your alarm system. That's kind of it. It's not there to give any further protection generally.
Right. Right. That makes sense. All right. Well, I'm getting it. I'm following now. Can you help me understand? Are there specific cameras that I should be using, or would you all recommend any specific type of cameras?
I can help out with that. So we recommend cameras that use our AI enhanced intrusion detection, like the Warrior 8.0 V3, the Deputy 8.0 V4, also the Watchkeeper Dual Vision. That one's a great option because it actually has two cameras. One is a PTZ, while the other one is a very wide angle lens. So if something on the wide angle lens picks up something, the PTZ can actually focus in, and that can look for things like a human body or maybe a vehicle or something like that.
Yeah, with that
Awesome.
dual vision too, it's nice because it's only, this is a service we'll get into, or you pay per camera per month. And the dual vision actually only counts as one camera in this case. So it brings a lot of value for that, because the remote guard in that situation can actually also manually control that PTZ if they want, which is, I think, really cool.
Oh, I didn't know
Really?
that. That's awesome. So they have
Yeah.
control over the PTZ itself. That's great.
Yeah.
Yep. The
Yeah.
human logic. That's one of the coolest parts about it, right? Human logic. So
Absolutely.
you're using AI and stuff is great, and it's a great starting point for it, and that's what's filtering them to get these alerts. But having that ability to determine, number one, is that guy a threat, and be able to look at them very clearly using something like a PTZ is an even greater benefit. So
And the ability to even zoom in closer, maybe if you have a clear line of sight to somebody's face or something, being able
yeah,
to identify if they are doing something that they shouldn't be doing. That's great.
yep,
Mhm.
And that can be incredibly beneficial too when they call the authorities. They can feed information directly to the police. They can provide a description of the person, license plate numbers, that sort of thing, live to the authorities.
So earlier, I think everyone's mentioned it, but earlier, some of you all mentioned like talk down and speakers and two-way audio. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that fits into remote guarding?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge benefit of remote guarding. It's talk-down functionality. It can work with built-in speakers and microphones on the cameras themselves, or you can also use IP cameras that integrate with the system. What it does is it takes it a step beyond your traditional active deterrence features. On a lot of our cameras, we have the ability to play audio recordings when a content analysis trigger happens. And that looks like, you're in a restricted area, you're being recorded. A lot of people filter those out. What the talk down function allows you to do is call out exactly what's happening in front of you, or, a customized response. But the remote guard would then be able to say, hey, you in the red shirt, I'm watching you, you're crawling underneath the car, I'm going to dispatch authorities, etc. And that's going to get most people's attention versus just that pre-recorded message.
Yeah, so I think the speaker part, so like having, you mentioned like the IP speakers that we can, put into these systems. They're like extremely loud, they're very noticeable. And like, when you compare it to active deterrence, I think this is like starting like a trend where like, we've thought of cameras in general of being like a passive, they record the activity and their evidence and everything like that. And shifting that from like cameras being able to not just passively record, but potentially actively try to stop something. And active deterrence was kind of the first real step into that, I think. These are our cameras that have like a built-in speaker that can yell a message out, a pre-recorded message. It can sometimes flash lights, including like ones that have like the little siren lights and stuff like that. But I think also, like Danny said, those are becoming more common and criminals are more aware of like how those actually work. So it went from being effective at scaring people, thinking like, oh, somebody's watching it, cops are coming, etc. I'm going to stop, to, oh, I saw that one down the block. And they're just, that's just a pre-recorded thing. I'm not really worried. That ability, and I know there's stats and there's facts out there if you look into it that say, how much more effective it is to say that this camera, hey, you in the red shirt, we're watching you and we're dispatching police, get out of here immediately. And to prevent that crime is again the key goal here. And talk down to a two-way audio functionality there, just even the talk down functionality is huge.
Awesome. Well, James, you said something there that actually I wanted to circle back to. You mentioned kind of the service and how much it cost in a little bit. Can we dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so cost wise, it could be as low as $85 per month per camera. And we also have some customization. So if you have a large facility that's like over 12 cameras, let us know. We can start. That's when things start to scale a little bit differently, and we start to get into custom pricing. And there's also other potential there too. So the $85 a month is for 12 hours continuous time span. So that means from 8 a.m. to, or 8 p.m., excuse me, to 8 a.m. or something like that. And so we have different options there too. So if you did want 24/7, we could provide that, or different hours, but that is going to cost more too. So the general average kind of person will be around $85 per month. But certainly let us know, and we can get you pricing, maybe talk to Danny or somebody on the team that will be able to get you a quote and figure out exactly what you need.
Heck yeah. Well, I think that should wrap up section 1 then. I feel like I have a good understanding now of what remote guarding is. We're going to move on to section 2, and that's who should be interested in this service, because it is a service. And I'll just start with, are there really any specific industries or client types that should be especially interested in this type of service, remote guarding?
Yeah, so really any industry that has physical assets that they would like to secure from theft or vandalism.
Right.
And I think even more specifically, when you think about industries that have that, what are potential assets that are, especially assets that are outside that a traditional alarm system can't really protect, that you have to sort of look into kind of an on-site guard, or kind of hope that nothing bad happens, I guess, is your other backup plan for that. But like car dealerships, if you're a car dealer, all of your assets are outside and they're usually not very well protected on a physical level. There's not usually fencing. They want these dealerships to be nice and open, and they are. So nice thing about that is they're nice and open for people who want to go purchase a car. the bad thing about that is they're nice and open for somebody who wants to go and potentially try to steal the cars or damage them or steal catalytic converters. It's a massive topic right now in this industry. But anything where you have your fleet outside, if you're, I know Danny, you have an awesome example of one that landscaping company that had their fleet of trucks outside and completely relying on these fleets of trucks. And what happened? Catalytic converter theft. And do you want to share us that example a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So a client of mine was having issues with catalytic converter theft. They ended up having several of their vehicles hit, but just one example that they provided was they had a diesel Isuzu box truck that got the catalytic converters stolen off of it. Turns out those are very expensive, and when they went to get them replaced at the dealership, it was going to cost over $19,000 just to get those replaced. Once she started looking at it, she was able to even just buy a used version of that vehicle for around the same cost. So it wasn't even worth keeping the vehicle when that happened to them.
Basically totaled them. That's kind of crazy. And like, that's a great example. These, and like, I know we talked about this a lot in some of the previous episodes, but Matthew's not here for this one, but he always goes into like not just the cost of like, okay, those catalytic converters, they had to go purchase new vans. Maybe insurance covered that. Now maybe your insurance is going up. But like what happened that next day when they couldn't go to customers' job sites? Like their entire operations potentially are impacted by the fact that they have no vehicles to get out there and to bring materials over to job sites. And
Mhm.
so they're probably having to scramble, get rental trucks and stuff, and you know, try to figure out how they're actually going to maintain operations. And it's very stressful. You don't want to be in that stressful situation. And in that case, if they had remote guarding, that could have been something that potentially could have been preventable. So that's, I think, the biggest thing when you have assets that not just, this isn't probably for somebody who's a little bit worried that somebody's going to ding dong ditch their house or anything like that. This is not what service is intended for. This is intended for where if something gets damaged outside, something gets vandalized outside, something gets stolen outside, it could potentially impact your business for weeks and months. And that's where that cost becomes almost negligible when it comes to the impact that this could prevent. So
Right. And James, really going beyond just the upfront dollar amount of these sorts of impacts on the business, replacing a couple of catalytic converters is one thing, but you have to take a look at the long-term effects as well. Speaking more towards the dealership or an auto repair facility, if one of your clients has their catalytic converter taken off of their vehicle, that is going beyond just the initial cost that you are going to incur to replace that. That's also putting stress and strain on that relationship. And, you could lose them as a client because they don't feel safe leaving
yeah,
their vehicle with you.
100%. I mean, you can, because I know a lot of places they'll have like, hey, you leave your car overnight, we're not responsible or whatever. That's all good. You might not be financially liable in that situation, but what does that customer relationship look like to you? Are you gonna, like you said, if I put my car out to an auto repair, I had to leave it overnight or whatever, and my catalytic converter was stolen, I wouldn't ever go back to that shop. I mean, there's lots of places where a service like that,
Yeah,
you need to maintain that relationship, and this is one of the ways that helps protect you and your customers.
yeah. We actually had a 65 Chevy pickup out at a body shop locally, and it got stolen. Like it was just gone. It's like, what do you do? Thankfully, it was found, but tore up, but it was found.
That was
But
your, so that was like
yeah,
your yeah. And did you go back to that shop?
nope, absolutely not.
Didn't think so. So like, I mean, it may not be your own,
Yeah.
you may be all trying to take that away from you, and that's fine and dandy, but what's the customer relationship worth there? And that long-term relationship can be gone by catalytic converter theft or something like that. And um even if, like, for example, your gym in your parking lot, and I get a smash and grab, and am I gonna feel comfortable going to that gym if I come back and my windows are all smashed and stuff? I don't know, probably not so much anymore. And um you want to be able to protect, not just if you have those assets, but also if your customers have those assets. Catalytic converters are an asset now. Like this is the most this is the question we get. How often do we get, Danny, how often do you get questions for catalytic converters? Like every day, probably, maybe
Yeah,
multiple times a day?
pretty much every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. It's absolutely a hot topic. And in fact, it's a lot of clients' first priority when it comes to security because it is a huge financial burden when something like this happens, especially for clients that may have large fleets of vehicles, like the landscaping company. That puts those vehicles out of service. It causes them to miss deadlines. There's just, exponential impacts after the initial theft.
I mean,
Perfectly.
just to add on top of that, just a couple of years ago, it was all the AC units
Yeah.
that were getting, parts taken out of them, or just the entire AC unit taken. I've had plenty of calls helping people with pull footage of that. And this, yeah, you may not have this particular service for your AC unit because it's usually right next to the side of your building, not out in the open. But if you had it on the camera that's out in the open, you might have more information than just, oh yeah, here, I can help you pull footage for that. Good luck. Sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, you can choose what you want there too. I mean, if you have expensive HVAC units outside, you certainly can have a camera that's just watching those HVAC units, and
Mhm.
or you can trigger it and see the other ones too. But like, I think like that's then these are two examples, great examples where a traditional alarm system is not going to be able to really help. Now, I do know they make like HVAC things where you can kind of put them in there and it causes a trigger or whatever. So there's a little bit more defensible there when it comes to that. But like both catalytic converters and HVACs are very difficult to have a traditional alarm set up for it. And so in a lot of cases, remote guarding or a service like this is the only way to protect against it,
Yep.
um, reliably at least. So
And James, those kind of single solutions that you're talking about, I mean, one type of alarm for the AC system, a cage or something similar for a catalytic converter, those are only
yep,
fixing one specific problem, whereas the remote guard is really flexible in what it can
yeah,
provide.
yeah, it's not the only thing it can protect. There's a fight in your parking lot, you're gonna know about you can know about it. Anything vandalism is another huge topic. People spray painting over expensive equipment. What if somebody spray painted on all of your cameras? That's might be a very expensive issue there. So you want to know about that stuff before it becomes an even bigger issue.
So I have a question. We're talking a lot about having cameras looking outside. Can you think of any, ideas that might include a camera inside a building or business or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have a secure area that you'd like to be notified if somebody is entering or acting suspicious near. An alarm system wouldn't necessarily do anything for you in that position. Traditional alerts, you kind of have to rely on if you're actually checking them. Whereas in this situation, the remote guard, they could act accordingly, potentially use the talk down function or contact you directly or your preferred point of contact.
This is where like the customization of this service really comes in. There's some crazy ones I've heard. So we've been talking about vandalism, theft, all this kind of stuff. There's one situation that I was told about where this guy is a car dealer. Okay, great. You think vehicles, theft, etc. But this guy is also using remote guarding to detect how long people are in the lot before a sales person goes out and actually talks to them. And if it's over 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever the threshold is, that remote guard calls the manager, and the manager comes out and tells the guys, hey, there's somebody out there, go out and talk to them. That can even be used in like the lobbies potentially. They can detect when somebody's entering the lobby, make sure somebody's there, or even just the activity of somebody, what's this person doing in the lobby, etc. So there's definitely like customization there for inside. We focus on the outside because that's a place where it's just almost indefensible without it. And the inside, you kind of have more potential with a traditional alarm system there. I think is kind of the key point. Not that you can't use both at the same time, but um the inside is definitely a possibility. So if you have ideas on something like that, let us know, and we can see if it's something that we can work through. Very customizable, I think is the point.
Nice.
Very customizable. And it's definitely something to consider, right? Especially if you have a building that is a retrofit, right? It's a older building and has a, outdated analog hardwired commercial alarm system that needs updating. It could be very expensive to update and upgrade the entire thing.
Yeah.
if 1 or 2 or 3 cameras interior could cover you, right? That might be a more cost-effective solution to get interior monitoring. That alarm, so to speak, if you're a cannabis facility, for example, or you have physical assets inside the facility, like a brewery has copper stills, things like this.
Or even in areas where nobody should necessarily be during certain hours. So,
Restricted.
if you know that basically nobody should be in the IT closet after hours, then you can set up a camera in there and then have remote guarding activate there too. So lots of situations I think you can use it inside too.
Sounds like a job for access control for the IT closet, but there you go.
Maybe both. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe both. Maybe both. Awesome. I think that'll wrap up section 2, and we'll slide right into section 3 then. Remote guarding versus just general notifications. James, before we get like too in depth, can you just start by telling us the difference between remote guarding and notifications?
I think the biggest thing when, notifications can be great, they're great to see what's going on in the facility, keep an eye on things, see when people are, but you have to be the one that's answering that. And I ask the question a lot to people. It's like, okay, yep, we can set up notifications, great, but who's going to be answering that notification at 2:30 in the morning? Somebody's in your parking lot walking around. Is that person a threat? Is that person just somebody walking across your parking lot that, doesn't need to be, need to really take action on? In that case, at 2:30 in the morning, our remote guarding service is going to be able to answer that notification, be able to see it, and be able to respond to it as it needs. And I think that's the biggest difference. Like, a push notification is a simple beep on your phone. Is that going to wake you up at 2:30 in the morning? If you're working 9 to 5, 8 hours a day, are you really going to be wanting waking up at 2:30 every time somebody's driving by? It's just, there's so much things with that human touch that the remote guarding gets, that you may have 20 or 30 different things happen throughout the course of the night that they're going to look at and they're going to check out and make sure it's okay, and you're never going to know in the morning because you weren't bothered by that. So that's, to me, like in a nutshell, the difference.
Well, and to just tack on top of that, it's pretty much human nature to get to a point where you're ignoring notifications on your phone sometimes. If you have certain apps that keep on just like every time you get an email, if you have a sound for your email notification, bing,
Yeah.
bing, bing, it's like, okay, I'm just not even going to pay attention to that anymore just because I don't want to.
And that happens pretty quickly too when it's 2:30 in the morning and you go,
Oh yeah.
I see my
Well,
phone, what's this guy, whatever.
And again, I mean, it's 2:30 in the morning, so just in case that notification does wake you up, who says you're going to be in the right state of mind to understand what you're seeing?
Yeah.
Where somebody is sitting there, that is their job to sit there and watch that camera for you when they get that notification and then make the decision for you, rather than you're groggy, you have no idea what you're doing. It's like, it's 2:30 in the morning. I just woke up out of dead sleep.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Sure. And, these folks, they're trained to do this. Whereas,
Absolutely.
you or somebody else that may be monitoring your system internally, you may not know exactly what you're looking for or what could be an indicator of suspicious activity.
Yeah, I think that's another key there. It's not just some guy taking it. It's a trained professional who's, knows what to look for. And you can even define what to look for in that case, but they're going to know the obvious things. I'll give you another example where the system came out pretty well. Was we have a client that's using it right now, and middle of the night around 2:30, they see a truck backing up to the front entrance, and who backs up a truck at 2:30 to a front entrance of a building? Well, ends up being that they see that, they kind of watch it, seems pretty suspicious. They call, in this case, the customer wanted them to call them for the action. And so they brought it up, looked at the cameras live, and like, oh, okay, that's just Dave. He's going to fix something in the building. No, but no, it's Dave's truck. We know who that is, right? No big deal. But if that wasn't Dave, and they knew that, like, this is kind of a suspicious activity, and so you can kind of customize that in terms of telling, like, what to really be there.
So I have a question that you may not be able to answer. In a situation like that, they call the owner of the service and they explain what's going on, what they're seeing. If that was not Dave that they knew was going to be there, would the service person then call the police for them, or would that be then on the end user?
No, they can dispatch police right there on the call with them.
Okay.
it's customizable. So you can say dispatch police. You can say, you might have a local guard on your facility, and they may say, hey, I'm going to call the local guard, and he's going to go take a look at it, and then I'll talk to the local guard, and then I'll call police if that local guard needs it as well. It's really
Gotcha.
customizable to the situation. So, police may not need to be called, something like that, for some situations, and the local guard can handle it. In some situations, the local guard is going to want the police. So,
Yeah, so that's a good segue into section 4, which is our final thoughts on remote guarding. And so I'll let anybody start who wants to, but let's walk through our final thoughts.
I'll take that. I guess. I'll take it first. I guess I should say. Is it's if you have physical assets outside, especially, and this might be the solution for you to prevent major theft, major vandalism. That's not just going to cost you at one time, but it's going to have reoccurring cost and cost well beyond the initial catalytic converter theft, like we mentioned throughout this video. So, check it out, ask us questions. It's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would kind of just say that one of the big benefits for me, we are inherently busy. Everybody is these days. This allows you to take some of your time back as well. You don't have to stress about the camera system, pulling footage, doing all of this stuff constantly. This is going to put it in somebody else's hands to make sure that your assets and your business is protected.
I just look at it as a cost saving measure personally, rather than paying
Yes, yes.
somebody to sit there and watch these cameras 24 hours for you. You just got a couple of cameras that you need covered, a few dollars a month, or really a few dollars a day per camera. Somebody's doing that for you. It could save on manpower for you. Use that money somewhere else.
That's true, Michael. And, an on-premises guard can only be in so many places at once, whereas
Absolutely.
the remote guarding service can be everywhere that you would want it.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point. This is, we're not going to beat around the bush and say that this is a cheap service by any means. It definitely costs per camera per month, but it is something that, when you compare it to a traditional guard, is significantly less. Or even hiring a second guard, like you may have one right now, and he's just at that level where, he's having, when he has to go out and he has to see what's going on in a situation or leave the room, he's not able to monitor those cameras anymore. So they can act as, eyes in the sky kind of thing, and constantly keep that traditional guard, informed on what's going on and where he needs to respond and everything like that. So, not a cheap service, but it's something that it can actually save you money if you're in that situation. So that was a really excellent point, I think.
That's it. Remote guarding. Awesome service, adds a ton of value. If you have assets that need secure preventative measures, remote guarding is a great service for that. So check us out, reach out to support, sales. All of the links will be in the description below. So make sure to check out that. That'll do it for this time. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next week.
Like, comment, subscribe.
See ya.